Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Conservative School Talk Radio. This is your host, Wayne Bradley. We're on a special Fix Michigan Monday on the afternoon special, and I want to thank everybody that's listening in. Today we're going to talk about the educational debate. And again, I think this is something that it's important for everyone to listen to, whether you live in the urban communities of America, in particular like in the Detroit area, or whether you live in the rural areas. The educational debate is something that's going to affect us all. This is a civil rights issue of our time, in particular in the urban community, because we are failing so drastically in comparison to some of the suburban counterparts with the school system. So today we're going to have three different guests on to give their different looks on their different opinions on the educational systems and what we can do to improve them. I'll have Carol Goss, who's the CEO of the Skillman Foundation, a nonprofit organization that works with a lot of the local groups and organizations to improve the school systems and also the area in general. I have Gary Naeyaert, who is the public relations president and also president of the Michigan Charter School Association, and I hope I didn't chop that up too much, but we'll also have Akindele Akinyemi, who is a political consultant and also educational consultant that will also give his look and opinion on what we can do to improve the Michigan school systems. I hope people listening in, feel free to call in if you're out there listening today. The call-in number is 347-996-3175. I want to thank you for joining me today. As we get back to school, I think it's something that we really need to focus and put a lot of effort into is looking at what we can do to improve the school systems. Because realistically, we need to be competing on a global level. We need to be competing on a global level as far as the curriculum that we're teaching our kids, the amount of time. I know that that's one of the things I've looked at is considering how much time we actually spend in school compared to other countries and why their students are so much more prepared for the challenges that come ahead and why they come over to our school systems and get better jobs and everything else that's associated with having a more serious look at the educational system. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and play the interview with Carol Goss, again, is the CEO of the Skillman Foundation. Listen in to her take on it. And, again, we're focusing, this is in the Detroit area, but the concern is the same throughout the country as far as our educational systems and what we need to do to fix it. So listen in, and I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you for joining me on Conservative School Talk Radio. This is your host, Wayne Bradley. My guest today is the president and CEO of the Skillman Foundation and also a close friend of my family, Ms. Carol Goss. How are you doing today, Mrs. Goss?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more about the Skillman Foundation?
Yes. The Skillman Foundation is a private, endowed foundation whose primary mission is to improve the lives of children by strengthening their schools and their neighborhoods. We are 50 years old this year. We are endowed, as I said, and we started by Rose Skillman, and our assets are about $420 million. And this year, in 2010, we will probably make grants totaling about $21.5 million. We do that in schools across the city of Detroit, and we do work in 6 neighborhoods where lots of children live.
Okay. Now, with the grants that they go to the schools, do they go directly to the schools, or are there certain programs that they have that you guys fund and supplement?
So we have a couple of different initiatives. We have one initiative that's called Good Schools Making the Grade, and the purposes of that initiative is to identify and reward schools that are doing a good job regardless of governance. So we provide support to schools that are a part of Detroit Public Schools. We provide support to charter schools, private schools, parochial schools. And those grants go directly to the school.
Okay. Okay. And now with the community, some of the community initiatives. Could you tell, in particular with the Brightmoor neighborhood, could you tell me a little bit more about that?
So we have developed partnerships with 6 neighborhoods. Brightmoor is one of those. There's 2 in Southwest Detroit. Then there's Cody Rouge, the North End, and Osborne. And there's about 65,000 children that live in those 6 neighborhoods.
Okay.
And we have worked since 2006 with people that live there, work there, volunteer there, and young people to come up with a set of goals and objectives that would transform their neighborhood, make it the best possible place for children.
Okay.
And so we provide grants to nonprofit organizations. We provide small grants to community-based grassroots organizations. We provide grants to public agencies to do work in those 6 neighborhoods, all with the long-term goals that the communities came up with of making those neighborhoods safer, healthier, making children well educated and prepared for life.
Right. Now, you work very closely with the Detroit Public Schools. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that they have in operating and measuring for success?
Well, the Detroit Public Schools, like many urban school districts, has suffered over the past 4 years with a lack of stability at the top.
Okay.
So there have been 4 different superintendents over the last 4 years. And what we have found is that it is very difficult to sustain high performance and quality when you don't have stability at the top to support it. So I think that the school district is challenged by that instability. The second thing is that there are really excellent schools. There's schools that are doing a good job. The majority of schools that are a part of our Good Schools Making the Grade are a part of Detroit Public Schools, and those are schools that have good principal leaders, where they have strong cohorts of teachers, a rigorous curriculum, parents that are involved. So there are really good schools, and it's very clear that we know how to do this work. We just don't have enough so that every child, no matter where they live in the city of Detroit, has access to a really good school. And finally, I think that Detroit Public Schools is really challenged because of issues around poverty.
Right.
We've been talking a lot about what would help to make children better prepared for learning when they come to school. And you're talking about families that are really poor, that don't have enough resources,
right.
Parents who maybe themselves were not parented well, so they don't know how to parent.
Right.
So we've been talking a lot about community schools, and these are schools that would be open early in the morning, stay open late, that would be partnerships with nonprofits who could provide mental health, social services, mentoring, tutoring, all kinds of things that would really help provide the support that families that live in poor communities need.
Right. I think a lot of people don't, we take it for granted, but a lot of these kids come to school, they haven't eaten, possibly in a day or so. They're seeing a lot of different things at home that does affect the way they go into, coming into school. And is that something you think we could, with those community schools, that could be more helpful to those children?
Absolutely. And we found that we already fund to a limited degree what we call family resource centers.
Okay.
In these family resource centers, the Department of Human Services and a medical provider, they have space actually within the school. So we've already found that helps with attendance. It helps with support the family. they need lots of support, and schools can become a hub and a place where families can get the kind of support that they need.
Right, exactly. The Skillman Foundation is also part of the Excellent Schools of Detroit. What part of that are you guys supporting in helping making that program move forward?
So we are part of this broad-based coalition called Excellent Schools Detroit. And the coalition includes 5 foundations: United Way, Detroit Public Schools, the Mayor's Office, Michigan's Future, New Detroit, the Detroit Federation of Teachers, and a couple of other nonprofits that came together to try to develop recommendations that we believe would create the right conditions in our city so that no matter where children go to school, that they would be going to a quality school. So we've been a part of this coalition because we feel that it's almost the culmination of our work. I mean, we've been working at this, the Skillman Foundation has for a very long time. We've funded a number of initiatives. We've funded the Comer Schools and Families. We've funded Schools for the 21st Century, the High School Development Project, the Principal Leadership Academy, just project after project after project. None of it was strong enough to really create the kind of reform that would make sure that every child was at a high-quality school, no matter where they went to school.
Right.
And so we have been providing some leadership to this coalition and helping them to move forward with the set of recommendations. There were 15 major recommendations that we believe will help to change our educational landscape here in the city of Detroit.
Okay.
And, we want to help Excellent Schools Detroit become its own independent organization.
Okay.
And then it will be its responsibility to be the children's advocate around education. The goal is that by 2020, that 90% of all high school graduates will graduate on time.
Right.
90% will go to college, and 90% will not need remediation once they get there.
Right. And what's your take after I just got off the phone with my last guest with Gary Naeyaert? He's from the charter schools. What's your position on public charter schools versus traditional public schools and the need for removing caps and that sort of thing?
Well, here's what I think about charter schools. So I think that the strength in charter schools is that it allows for the kind of autonomy that can support innovation.
Okay.
So it is a model that does and can work. But not all charter schools are doing a really good job.
Okay.
And we have to really, we have to face the brutal facts around that just because it is a charter does not mean that it is excellent.
Right.
So we have to really set governance aside and say we need for excellence to exist wherever children go to school. It is harder to move quality forward in Detroit public schools just because of the instability of the leadership.
Right.
And the lack of accountability.
That's what I was going to ask about, the lack of accountability.
That's right. I mean, there's nobody that we hold accountable for what happens in schools, really. And so it's much harder to get excellence in a system, a big public school system in that way. In charter schools, for the most part, you can hold the authorizer accountable, and we should hold them accountable. If they gave a school a charter, they should hold that school and the school board and the school leadership accountable for results.
Right. Well, Well, I guess that's one of the major differences is that they will shut down those schools if they're not performing, right?
Well, we've been talking to them about that, and they all seem to indicate their interest and willingness to do that. Okay. I'm going to tell you, in all honesty, that in the city of Detroit, we have too few schools, whether they are charter, whether they are part of Detroit Public Schools, private or parochial, that are really doing a good job.
Okay.
So I don't lift up charters as the panacea. I think we have to step back and focus on quality.
Right. And what do you think about the Teachers for America program that they've been trying to put into the Detroit school system? Do you think that's something that they ought to look more seriously into?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think the research demonstrates that in other places where there has been Teach for America programs, that it has led to a really strong talent pool. And so what we know is that if we're going to have really good schools, we've got to have really talented teachers. And so Teach for America brings into a school system some of the brightest young people that you can find across this country. And we believe, we actually are a funder of the Detroit Teach for America program.
Okay.
So we actually believe that it's a strength. Now, is it perfect? No, but I think that they have a very strong alumni, and by that I mean that they have people who have graduated from that program, who have stayed in the district,
right,
and really contributed to excellence taking place. So we are very supportive of the Teach for America program.
Okay. Why do you think there's so much resistance and pushback from the Detroit public school system on that?
I think it has to do with adult issues. So, because if you really think about children, then you want children to be exposed to every opportunity. But here's the problem. When a school district is laying off and cutting back teachers that are certified teachers, but they are taking on the Teach for America program, then that is an issue that often that the union brings forward. So I think that's the biggest resistance. There'll be probably 65 Teach for America fellows in charter schools starting in the fall. I'm not sure if there'll be how many will be in Detroit Public Schools, but we're hopeful that there will be there.
Okay. If a local grassroots organization wanted to get a grant from the Skillman Foundation, what would they need to do to apply for a grant?
Well, you know what? They should go on our website, which is www.skillman.org. They should go on our website and look at the grant guidelines. Our work, our education work is pretty much citywide, but our other work around supporting the needs of young people and their families is really focused on those 6 neighborhoods.
Okay.
So that's something that a nonprofit would have to think about. You know, are they in that community? Are they connected already? If they're not there, do they want to work there? Because we really believe that organizations need to work where lots of children live. And so for our grants, we just focus them very strategically and very intentionally in communities where lots of children are.
Okay, excellent. And going into the future here, what are some of the other projects? I had someone send me a question and were wondering about the $70 million initiative to create or renovate new schools in the area. How is that project going, or has any of it got started yet?
Well, you know, there are some schools, 11 new schools will open in this fall. People aren't even really talking about that. Some of those charter.
Okay.
Some of them are new schools within Detroit private philanthropies to invest in Detroit and in schools. So it's very interesting. There'll be a couple of new high schools that will open this fall. Both of them are charter high schools. But within Detroit Public Schools, they will open a new Ben Carson Academy, which will focus on the health sciences.
Okay.
And then they will open next year a high school that will be a partnership with Johns Hopkins University, City Year, and Communities and Schools called Diplomas Now. So there's a lot of things that are really going on. People really just, in spite of what people might read in the paper, there are lots of efforts going forward really trying to make sure that children are well educated.
Okay. Excellent. Now, you are one of the most respected businesswomen in Southeast Michigan, and I just had to, we weren't covering too much politics here. I was wondering, was it true that you were a possible candidate for Lieutenant Governor?
I've never been a candidate for anything. My current job.
I had to ask.
I'm sure you did.
Your name was being floated around there. Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure. Now, the Skillman Foundation, it does not raise funds, so that means people can't call and just donate and contribute to the Skillman Foundation?
That's right. Yeah, no, we are a privately endowed foundation, so we don't raise dollars. That we make our grants really based on the investment and the income that we make off of our investments and the way that our endowment is invested. And so as you know, the stock market hasn't been great lately, but we're still very committed to what we're doing.
Now, out of curiosity, would the Skillman Foundation support organizations like this newly formed Detroit 300 that are out trying to protect the city, protect people and trying to make the neighborhoods better? Is that the kind of organizations that might want to talk to the Skillman Foundation?
Well, the IRS limits who we can make grants to. So
okay.
The eligible organizations have to be public charities.
Okay.
They have to have a 501c3 tax status.
Gotcha.
However, in the neighborhoods where we work, we have provided support to grassroots organizations who are doing similar kinds of things, like policing their neighborhood, doing neighborhood watch, conducting cleanup projects.
Okay.
And often we do that by making a grant to a eligible charity like Black Family Development that's working in that neighborhood, or Southwest Solutions or Don Bosco Hall, and they then can work with the grassroots organization.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I appreciate you so much for coming on the show today. Can you give people the website address one more time so that if they want to know more about the Skillman Foundation, they can go online and check it out?
Our website is www.skillman.org, and I enjoyed very much being on your show.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Goss. You have a great day.
You too. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right, now it's the interview with Mrs. Goss. I think we have a caller here, so I'm going to take this call real quick. Caller, you on the air?
Oh, man, I wanted to talk to Mrs. Goss there. I was enjoying
sorry
that.
About that. That was a recorded interview. Sorry about that.
Oh, wow. Okay, I just tuned in. I think I'm your friend on Facebook.
Okay.
I'm Rick. I'm Rick Fleming. Alonzo Rick Fleming.
Okay, how you doing?
All right, man. I'm always hitting on your, love your post there on Facebook, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
What did you think of that interview you just listened to?
Oh, I liked it. I mean, I'm happy with what they're doing. I'm just hoping that they don't. When she said grassroots organizations, and then she connected it with patrolling their neighborhoods. I mean, that's the only thing I'm concerned about. Those.
Oh, well, that was more of a question for me. I had to ask that because we've just had, in the Detroit area, just been a lot of stuff that goes on, and you do have some good community groups that are out there that are being formed anyway that are aggressively trying to, just do a better job of patrolling our own neighborhoods, because that's essentially where that's going to start. I mean, it's obviously the police job to keep people safe, but when you're talking about in the areas like Detroit where it's just so much stuff going on, it definitely helps to have community groups helping out and being involved. If nothing else,
that's awesome.
Following up,
I'm kind of like on the front end of the whole process. I believe that you don't have to, for example, picket a crack house if you teach the children, because they see that's after the fact. If you teach the children how crack cocaine affects every part of your body in a negative way, then you would not have the customers. Same thing with all the liquor stores. I just think that if you educate people and spend more, I think if we educated them, spend more time educating the youth, then you don't even see the crack house or the multiple liquor stores. And so that's why I'm more with the education piece as opposed to the after-the-fact pieces of fixing closing the barn door after the horse got out.
Right, I understand.
Kind of thing, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's definitely, it's got to change. The whole culture has to change in what we're teaching our kids. But, and like I said, I don't know, what area are you in?
I'm in Las Vegas, but I'm a businessman. I do a lot of business in Detroit. Okay. I have some people there on the ground right now. I'm actually literally from Detroit, born and raised, went to Detroit public schools,
gotcha.
All that kind of stuff, the whole password issue. That you need to have an opinion about Detroit, you have to give the password.
I understand. I definitely understand. I think that it needs to be a combination. It needs to be almost a co-op of different ideas and different strategies, because in certain situations, even though we might teach our kids, like you said, crack cocaine and alcohol is bad, you got a lot of situations where people are being innocent bystanders, are victims of where they live. I mean, you got places where kids can't go outside and play because they're going to go do crack or anything like that, but you got people fighting.
You have a war zone. I understand. You have a war zone.
Where I'm thinking of more of community getting involved is where you're taking your community back, where you don't allow all that to happen in your neighborhoods, and that's going to require help. It's not going to happen by yourself, and the police can't be there 24/7, but it has to be a situation where people feel safe to come out and actually say that that's not going to happen in front of my house.
Right. I see what's happening. I keep a very close eye on Detroit because I own property in Detroit.
Okay.
I still have family members in Detroit. I have employees in Detroit. I'm hoping to come back home, depending on how strong Robert Bob and Carol Goss and all these people who are improving these schools, depending on how if they can stay focused on it. If they can stay focused and keep going in a direction, then, I'm planning to make a lot more investments in the city of Detroit. But
we need more people like you.
There are people
appreciate that. We definitely need more people
in my experience, the reason that the people like myself have left Detroit, and I left 2 years ago. I shut my business down completely, moved out west, and I made more money in 6 months out here than I made the entire 4 years that I was in Detroit. I graduated from college in 2003, came to Detroit, set up my business.
Right.
And couldn't do we write software.
Okay.
We could, even though it's much needed there, the political environment, the economic environment, the blame game environment, it's just not good for business. So I'm of the opinion that the whole environment has to just be wiped out and rebuilt. I'm just under that opinion. I don't think that you can fix the system with the current political structure, the current the educational structure I like. And I do like what I see Dave Bing doing. I think he's just but generally speaking, the business people have been chased out of the city of Detroit, and the tax base has just been wiped out. I paid $5,000 in property taxes in the city of Detroit last year.
Right.
But I don't get any type of benefit from it.
That's the big problem, and I think that's why I'm trying to get different opinions of different. Because as far as the school, as far as education and down the road, we have to build the infrastructure back up through the educational process.
Yes.
I mean, that's why I'm trying to. My next guest is going to be the Vice President of Legislative Affairs with the Michigan Association of Public School Academies, and we're going to talk a little bit about the whole charter school, public school comparisons, and see what see what we can do to also improve it from that standpoint. But I appreciate you calling in and
Not
listening
a problem,
in
brother.
today.
I'll be listening in. Yes.
Thank you so much. All right. And so our next guest on the show, we're going to talk to. I appreciate anybody. Like I said, people listening. We need more people investing in Detroit. It's unfortunate that he had to leave Michigan to create and make his business more successful in Nevada. But we have to create a better business atmosphere for businesses to feel welcome and want to stay here in Michigan. So a big part of that, again, is going to deal with the whole educational structure and the kind of employees that we put together for these businesses. So my next guest is Gary Naeyaert, who is the Vice President of Public Relations and Legislative Affairs for MAPSA, which is the Michigan Association of Public School Academies. We had a good talk about the public school system compared to the public charter school systems, and listen in on this interview and let me know what you think. Thank you for joining me on Conservative School Talk Radio. This is your host, Wayne Bradley. Today we're going to talk a lot about education, one of my most important causes and things that I'm concerned about, in particular in the state of Michigan and very much in particular in the city of Detroit. My guest today, Gary Naeyaert, is the Vice President of Public Relations and Legislative Affairs for the Michigan Association of Public School Academies. Gary, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Wayne.
Thank you so much. Some of the things that we're going to talk about today are including the misconceptions and and some of the ideas of public schools versus public charter schools. And first, can you define the differences? And so people who are listening, whether it be parents or obviously professionals who know what's going on, can you explain the difference between the public school system and the public charter school system?
Well, I sure can. I mean, most of us grew up and were educated by what is now referred to as the traditional public school system. There was only one school system that you could attend, and your zip code, your address dictated, on the dotted line within the district boundaries which school you went to for elementary school, middle school, junior high, and high school. That was considered at the time a monopoly for public education because your address dictated everything. That monopoly was broken in the mid-'90s in Michigan, where we decided as a state that we were going to fund education through statewide sales tax as opposed to local property taxes, and we were going to give a grant to every school for the students that are there, no matter where they're from, and students were then allowed to choose what school they go to, and their state dollars follow them. And you can go to literally any public school in your district or out of your district through schools of choice, or you could attend one of these newer models, a public charter school, which is an autonomous, independent public school that can take students from anywhere in the state. And there's a lot of other features to the schools, but from a structure and governance standpoint, you now can travel and choose where you would like to go to school, and state dollars that fund education follow you.
Right. And what are some of the key differences in management between the traditional public schools and now the public charter schools?
The ones that are not visible to parents and to consumers, the fact that every charter public school is a standalone school district. So decisions are made about how that school operates inside that building. The decisions are made on a building-by-building basis. We call that site-based management. If you're a teacher in a public charter school and you need pencils, you turn around and ask the school leader for pencils, and the next day you get pencils. You don't have to go through a large, impersonal, central office bureaucracy to go backwards to a district or office or to an ISD or to other levels of bureaucracy and management in order to get things that you need in your classroom. So they're a little more flexible, they're a little more nimble and responsive, and because we are schools of choice, because you have to choose to come here, charter schools will tend to be much more responsive to the needs and concerns of students and families, because if you're not satisfied with the education your child is receiving, you will speak with your feet and walk down the street to a different school. So we tend to have a smaller environment in a charter school than in a traditional public school, tend to have a smaller size in the building of students, smaller class size, and so we tend to have a little more sense of community that you build within the school, and the success of those features is borne out by kind of the academic achievement that many of the charter schools are exhibiting.
Right. Now, I was looking at a report that said that the public charter school students are outperforming the traditional public schools on the 2009 MEP.
Well, what we find in the MEP test, which is administered to all third graders through eighth graders in the state with a variety of subjects, you have how do all students in the state perform statewide?
Right.
And when you look demographically at charter school students, they don't match kind of the statewide average. We have a disproportionate percentage of our students are at-risk students who are of color, who are students with eligible for free or reduced lunch. And so to compare all charter school students, which there's about 111,000 of them in the state out of 1.6 million students, to compare them to the state average is not an apples-to-apples comparison. So the Department of Education has identified about 25 traditional districts in the state that have the same demographic profile as the charter school students. So when you compare those, that's really an apples-to-apples comparison. When you compare those, students in public charter schools dramatically outperform students in traditional public schools on the MEP test. I think it's 25 of the 27 tests that are administered in grades 3 through 8. Charter school students in aggregate perform better or higher or more proficient than the traditional system.
Okay. And what do you think, from an administration standpoint, what do you think is helping produce these better results? Is it the teachers themselves? Is it the style of curriculum? What do you think contributes to these higher results?
I think one of them is that we have what is the environment for learning in that school? Is it smaller?
Okay.
First, is smaller, more intimate, more one-on-one attention? Is it safer? I mean, no child can learn if the child is not safe in their environment. But in public charter schools, you may see in most of them, you may have uniforms in some schools, you have a different culture in some schools, you have expectations for character development and personal responsibility that many families are attracted to. And in terms of the academic day, we are likely to have a longer school day and a longer school year.
Okay.
So that you get more time on task. Too many of our students in Michigan are reading behind grade level. They're not at grade level. And what we're seeing, generally speaking, in the state is that the school year continues to shrink and shrink.
Right.
The legislature goes back and forth between mandating how many days you have to go to school versus how many hours of instruction. You've seen many traditional districts are down to 165 days of instruction a year when our international competitors are at 220 days or more. And average public charter school is probably a lot closer to 180 days of instruction. So that's what the kids need, more time on task in order to catch up and get not only at grade level but ahead of grade level.
Okay. And how are the actual teachers evaluated as compared, like in traditional public schools compared to public charter schools? How are teachers evaluated?
Well, in the traditional school model, teachers are hired, and once they receive tenure and have been established in their jobs, the statistical likelihood of removing a teacher is almost negligible.
Right.
It takes a district, somewhere over $300,000 to even have a tenure hearing to pay for both the legal costs, the substitute teacher, paying for the teacher to not teach because you can't fire them. So, I mean, you have a lot of the ability to get rid of a substandard teacher in the traditional school world doesn't happen.
Right.
The general rule. In the charter school world, because the vast majority of our schools are not serve at the pleasure of the school, and there is a real emphasis on performance.
Okay.
So you asked whether people have merit pay or not. Well, in our side of the education world, we do have merit pay. On our side of the world, we do incentivize teachers to perform, and then teachers who cannot help students grow and learn are not going to be in the profession very long in a charter school. So it's a much different dynamic.
Right.
We have many of our teachers in the charter school world are either new to the profession, and we are the area of public education that's growing, so there are jobs available.
Right.
That's why we attract them, because that's where the jobs are. Or we have a lot of teachers who are in a second phase of their career. They may have taught in a traditional public school environment for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, but they come over to the charter school side because they want to focus on teaching and not as much on discipline and bureaucracy and other adult issues.
Right.
And they appreciate the environment because everyone who's in that school, wants to be in that school, and so it's a different environment for the teacher as well as the student.
So it sounds like in the public charter schools, they definitely sound like they have more accountability for the productivity of these students. Then
I think it's safe to say that all public schools have some levels of accountability and reporting, within what's required under the state law and through the general kind of governance of the school district and then the Department of Education. And in the public charter segment, we have all of those levels of accountability, and we have more. We
Right.
have boards of directors for every school that are public officials that oversee that school, but we also have authorizers for every school. And an authorizer is typically a public university. So a public university in Michigan is overseeing that school to make sure that they are not only meeting their requirements, but that they are improving the educational outcome for those students. So we have, in traditional public schools, we have accountability, and in charter public schools, we like to say we have accountability plus.
Gotcha. I'm a proud graduate of a Detroit public school. I went to Mumford, and things have changed a lot even since I've graduated. But a kind of thing that I noticed is there's some resistance in the city regarding sometimes some of the charter schools, and they feel like they're taking over certain. Why do you believe that there's any resistance when actually these, like you said, the schools are outperforming some of the traditional public schools?
Well, I think one of the reasons for people are kind of wary sometimes of a different approach or a different model is because it's new and different, and because we have not had yet a generation of parents grow up and that their experience as a student was one where you could choose the public school that you attended.
Right.
Most parents today are still parents who grew up when you didn't make a choice. You sent your child to the school you were meant to send them to. And so it's still a newer concept, and so less than 15 years, that we've had schools in operation. So it is still a new concept, and that is scary to some. It is for some of the adults in the K-12 education world. We're different because we have more autonomy and flexibility than traditional school leaders may have because of our site-based management and making decisions within every building. And that flexibility is comes with again a higher level of accountability and a more likelihood that you are going to be removed. We just in fact, today it was just announced from the state that the State Department of Education has granted $3 million apiece to 28 of the lowest performing schools in the state.
Okay.
And the goal is to use those funds to improve that school. Well, in the charter school segment, we had 6 of our poorest performing schools this year in the last summer were closed.
Right.
For poor performance. So, in the charter school world, you will be accountable or you will not be open.
Right.
So is that not consistent with the mindset of a lot of adults who work in the K-12 world? Probably. So this isn't everybody's cup of tea, and it doesn't have to be. We're not suggesting that all schools should be public charter schools. We think that there are some lessons learned in the charter school segment that could be exported to other schools. But I think what's healthy is competition and choice, and parents choosing between a private school, a parochial school, a traditional a public or a charter public school. But if you were a person without the means to move to a suburb or another city with a school system you wanted to go to, or you did not have the means to pay $10,000 a year for private school tuition, you didn't have any choices until the charter school movement in order to have a tuition-free option for public education. So that option exists. We think that it's healthy, and we know that it's one of the biggest reasons that there is a lot of tension is that frankly our schools, because they're not represented by the organized teachers union, that becomes a real point of frustration in terms of public policy and dealing with the legislature. And again, these are all adult issues. They don't really have anything to do with what's best for kids.
Right. I think, and that's one thing that I think that does frustrate me, in particular in the Detroit area, is because of the fact we're talking about a lot of the union issues and not necessarily anything that has to do with the kids. What is your opinion on the whole Teachers for America situation and how they were coming to the Detroit area, and they were also blocked for quite a while from actually being able to perform in that area?
For many years, I'm thinking at least 7-8 years, we have not had any Teach for America graduates working in Michigan. And for people who aren't familiar with the program, it's a program where the best and brightest college graduates from a variety of educational majors and disciplines are recruited to receive training to go into the classroom. They go into the classroom only in urban areas, in the toughest areas to teach. They go in. And I have a phenomenal study that shows that in L.A., where we have a lot of comparative data, students taught by Teach for America alums performed higher than students taught by traditionally trained teachers. There's a knock against some of these Teach for America folks because they're thought of as not having the right background. Well, they perform well, and 2/3 of them stay in K-12 education as either teachers or administrators once we get them in. So they really are great young people that are great role models for kids. They are good teachers. In Detroit this year, starting with the new school year, there'll be about 100 of these Teach for America alums in the state. 80 of them, 75 or 80 will be in charter schools, and the other 20-25 will be in select DPS schools. And as I said, we're bringing them back. Teach for America is back because one of the educational reforms passed by the legislature in December allowed for alternative certification for teachers, allowed for teachers who did not come through an undergraduate school of education. And these are teachers who receive extensive training. They're ready for the classroom. They perform very well, but it's probably worth saying they're not likely to be represented by the organized teachers union, certainly not the ones that are in charters. What people in Michigan, I think, would find interesting is that the University of Michigan produces or graduates the largest number of Teach for America participants in the entire country.
Wow.
We have not allowed any of them to stay in Michigan and work. We have to export them. So we're exporting some of the brightest minds that are being educated here in Michigan, sending them to other cities and other states. And that's a heck of a brain drain.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very interesting fact that we're sending out some of our best and brightest to other places when we sorely need them bad in the Detroit area. Where are we on Code 6E? And have there been any schools opening up in the Detroit area yet that are Code 6E compliant?
I'm sorry, Wayne, did you say 6C or 6E?
6E. Sorry about that.
Under the 6E, new provision of state law, which is the Schools of Excellence, there are 10 applicant spots that are available that have to be filled in the next 5 years. No one has yet no authorizer has yet brought one of those contracts or an applicant to the Department of Ed for their approval, although discussions are ongoing for that. And then there were 2 cyber schools that were authorized as 6Es, and I guess it's not a secret. Those 2 cyber schools have been authorized.
Okay.
They're going to be full-time online schools, and they're each accepting students from all over the state. They have been authorized there's a school authorized by Grand Valley State University, which is being run by an organization called K-12 Inc., and there's the second school, which is authorized by Ferris State, which is run by Connections Academy. And if anyone wanted to find those, I know that they've been recruiting students. I know there's been a lot of buzz and a lot of excitement, and this is the first foray into a standalone, 100% virtual charter school in Michigan, although we do have a few virtual schools that are already in the state. So those two are on board. And then the third category of 6Es are to take an existing high-performing charter school, convert it to a school of excellence that would open up their spot under the cap for charters to be used by a new school. Those conversions some of those conversions will occur during the current school year. That will open up some spots for the next school year.
Is there any legislative action going on right now to help remove the caps on charter schools?
Well, for a decade, since we reached the cap of 150 university-authorized charters, there's always been, almost a daily discussion about removing the cap, and it's been quite a contentious discussion. What was done in December was to, instead of raising the cap or eliminating the cap just unilaterally, what we've created in Michigan is now what should be heralded as one of the first in the country, a legitimate smart cap, in that within those 150 university-authorized charters, the highest performing of those schools will be able to convert to be a school of excellence under 6E in the law, and then their spot will be available. So what you really have is the ability to grow charter schools based on quality performance. And so we're one of the only states that is not limited by the number of charters you can open, but what we have is the opportunity to open a great deal of charters, but again, based on quality. And this is a challenge that the charter school movement is prepared to meet, and it's one that parents should be applauding, because I think what you're going to find is that with the recently passed federal legislation on education reform, let alone what we've done in Michigan, what you're seeing are the lowest performing schools are being forced to fix themselves or close. And then we're going to expand. That affects charter public schools as well as traditional public. So what you're going to see are hopefully the schools that are the worst performing will no longer be options. And the new schools that open are going to have to be proven track record schools, traditional public or charter public. So I think what you're going to find is that the number of schools in the state 5 years from now might be similar to what it is now, but I think you'll find the overall performance is going to increase. And that's really the goal of the federal government, it's the goal of the state government, and it's kind of a goal that we've always shared, is to raise the quality quotient. So that's what we need, are more kids. Even today we have some great stories of some great schools, traditional public and charter public, that are doing excellent things with students. But you still have, far too many students that are underserved by the school that they're in today. Are especially in our urban areas, especially in the largest school district in the state. The chief academic officer for DPS referred to what's happening in Detroit as academic genocide.
I agree.
I heard her say that in a radio interview, and I thought it was very candid for someone within DPS to make that assessment, because it's literally true when you have single-digit percentage proficiency rates.
I've called it many times. I'd say that is the true civil rights issue of my generation, is the education.
Absolutely. I'm not a sociologist, and I don't have a magic wand, but we have been plagued with poor academic, performance, and plagued with poverty in Michigan, urban areas and rural areas. And this isn't a chicken and egg problem. We have not figured out as a society how to fix poverty. But I think we have figured out how to educate even the hardest to reach kids. And we have the models that can do that. And I think if you can take a child and give them the skill set they need to not only graduate from high school, but to get post-high school training, be it trade school, community college, or a four-year college, you're going to break that cycle of poverty for that family by doing that. And so let's do more of what we know works, which is getting these kids first to grade level and then better, then get them college ready.
Exactly.
Let's do that because we have proven it with the same. I mean, you look at University Prep Academy in Detroit, a charter school working with the same kids who were in traditional public school. They're looking at a 98% graduation rate, over 90% college acceptance rate. Those are the same kids. I mean, you can't say that kids can't do the job.
Right.
It's not the kids who have failed the kids.
Right. I totally.
So you can change the system, the model, the approach, and you can. All kids can learn. If you don't believe that, then you really shouldn't be in the business.
Right. And what advice would you give to parents that are considering and comparing the traditional public schools and the public charter school system?
Well, I would tell them to become more educated consumers. I think the most important thing they need to understand is that they do have a choice. I mean, that's the hardest message to get through, and it's the most important message. Once they understand that they have a choice, they need to do their own research. Now, they can search a lot of places, look at a lot of lists, but we have this growing movement in Southeast Michigan, led by some very visionary folks who really do care about all education in Michigan, and that's the Excellent Schools Detroit proposal, the Skillman Foundation, the United Way of Southeastern Michigan, the Detroit Chamber of Commerce, a number of key charter segment leaders are all working together, and they just published in the last week or last couple of weeks a report card ranking all of the schools in Southeast Michigan, school, middle school, elementary school, based on their proficiency ratings and compare it to the state average and the city average. And so at a minimum, you want to look at this report card, and you want to look at, like in the past, the Skillman Foundation recognized schools as a good schools program. I mean, the Skillman Foundation Good Schools Award is really a badge of honor, and it's a recognition for a school to say that's a school that you could and would and should send your kids to. So I think parents need to, be looking at Excellent Schools Detroit, look at the Skillman Foundation. I mean, look at organizations like ours for the objective data on how their schools are performing. Somebody had joked once at a State Board of Ed meeting that, you should be able to walk in every school and they should have a big poster on the wall that tells you how many of their kids are proficient in math and reading, how many are at grade level.
Right.
And if you walked in, if there were less than 10% of the kids were proficient, you'd probably walk right out.
Right, I agree.
And I don't think that's a bad idea. I know some people who would pay to produce those posters, to put them up in schools so that people would know, does this school perform or doesn't it? Because if you put your child in an environment where failure is accepted,
where it's the norm,
routine,
right,
your child is much more likely to fail than if you put them in an environment where success is expected and success is delivered. And, all the schools look the same from the outside.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if the building's old, the building's new. I mean, facilities can matter. Football fields can matter. There's a lot of decisions that go into where you go to school. But, look at how many of those kids are college ready, or look at how many kids are getting accepted. Look at how many kids are proficient. And I think you'd find that consumers, adults, parents should become more commercial in their mindset.
Right.
Should shop for a school.
Right.
It's going to serve their child. And in the charter school segment, we have schools that are themed. If you really like science and math, we have schools that excel in that. If you like the performing arts, we have schools for that.
Right.
Want to learn Arabic culture, we have schools that specialize in that. In addition to adhering to the state's merit curriculum and giving them all the basics that everyone needs to have, you can really, there are themes and approaches in some of our schools that are very attractive to folks.
Okay. All right, well, I really appreciate that. Can you give, just in case they're listening, like maybe a couple website addresses that they can go to get some of this information?
Well, the easiest website address I can give is www.charterschools.org. which is our website for our association. And that website would give you, you can search for charter schools that are in your area, by how many miles away from your address, and then you can read a little profile of each of those schools. But if you're interested in looking beyond the charter sector, which we recommend people look everywhere, the report card I mentioned from Excellent Schools Detroit, that is the name of their website, excellentschoolsdetroit.org, all one word without any spacing. And people can go there and they can read all about how they've looked at student achievement. And that's their first stab at this. And I think as they develop this further, I think you're going to see other information, not just proficiency listed there for the report card. But I think that's going to become in the future very helpful for folks.
Okay. Well, Gary, thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope that the people listening, that this is something they can use, again, to help make better decisions for their children. And you're welcome on the show anytime.
That sounds great, Wayne. Thanks so much. Let me know, and I'll come back anytime.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
You bet.
Bye-bye. So that was Gary Naeyaert from the Michigan Association of Public School Academies, which is the charter schools of Michigan, the public school charters. So again, we're hearing some very different debates and different angles on what we need to do to improve and give. Again, this is more of an option for the parents that need to be educated on all the different issues and what choices they have. And I really want to be more of a proponent for giving parents more choices, more options, because a failing school system should not be the only option for some of these parents in some of these areas. So my final guest is someone who I consider a good friend, someone who I constantly bounce ideas off of, and who's done some educational consulting, political consulting, and he has some great ideas on how we not only reform the educational system, but how we start to teach our kids differently and reform the whole educational system as a whole here in America, because he always says you must think globally, and right now we're losing in the global economy when it comes to the lack of education here in our country. So my third guest, Akindele Akinyemi, he's a political and also educational consultant. So listen in on his interview and let me know what you think. The call-in number is 347-996-3175. Again, the call-in number is 347-996-3175. And here's my next guest, Akindele. Thank you for joining me today on Conservative School Talk Radio. We've been discussing back-to-school specials, discussing the education issues here in the Detroit, Michigan area, and also on a more national scale. And someone who I think has a lot of knowledge on the subject and who I've talked to many times about the educational gaps and things we need to do to improve the system. I brought on today Akindele Akinyemi. He's a political and also educational consultant. Akindele, welcome to the show, my brother.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, my brother.
I appreciate you coming on today. Now, for the people that aren't familiar with you, and you're very famous on Facebook and throughout the internet. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, and we'll get into some of these issues real quickly.
Oh, absolutely. Again, thank you for having me on the show. I am an educator by trade. I've been in the field of education for over 10 years. I've taught 4th through 12th grade, both language arts and English language arts and social studies. I've also helped open schools. I've trained personnel. And presently, right now, outside of me doing different type of policy work, whether that be educational or public policy, one of the passions that I have on a personal level is dealing with global education and applying it to the K-12 model of education here in the United States. I think global education right now is very important, especially if our children want to compete at the international level. I strongly believe that we need to kind of step our game up a little bit in terms of what is really going on academically to help get our students and our parents prepared to compete in the global market. So that's really a huge passion for me, and that's what I'm working with.
Right. Now, you've said that you've helped create and open some schools. In what areas were you actively doing that?
Well, I helped open these are charter schools. I've helped open a charter school in the city of Pontiac. That was Pontiac Academy for Excellence. I helped open that school up. That was back in 2000. I also helped open Dream Academy in Benton Harbor, Michigan. That was back in 2008. And it's interesting how how people open schools because you're at the ground level, kind of evaluating what's really going on. I was at Pontiac Academy for Excellence a little bit longer than Dream Academy, but just to get to know the people and the students and the parents and the community at large, I thought that was a rewarding experience.
Okay. Now, I recently spoke with Gary Naeyaert, who is the public relations, the media person over at the Charter School Association for Michigan. And we were kind of talking between the differences between the public school system and the public charter school system. What do you think are some of the glaring differences in those two systems?
Well, charter schools are actually public schools. They're taxpayer funded. They have the same mandates from the Michigan Department of Education as traditional public schools. The difference is the way they're set up.
Okay.
Whereas traditional public schools, you have an elected school board where people can go and vote for their school board members. You don't do that in a charter school. Charter schools are governed by a board of directors, normally about, on average, 5 to 7 people sit on that board of directors. Those board of directors have to be approved by the authorizer. The authorizer is really the partner that allows you to run that particular charter school. There are some things about charter schools that most people don't realize. One thing is charter schools are under heavy scrutiny most of the time. The authorizer is constantly evaluating not just your academics but your financial health. The intermediate school district, depending on where you stay, if you're here in Wayne County, where I'm at, it'll be Wayne Risa. They too have some say in terms of how that charter school is operated, basically with attendance. And then some charter schools, most charter schools have what is called educational management organizations or companies, and the EMOs are responsible for the day-to-day operation. So you have a lot of accountability within these charter schools. If there's a piece missing, whether it's your academics,
right,
your financial health, your attendance is too low, you could be shut down.
Right.
Or your contract will not be renewed by that authorizer. These reports are taken to the Michigan Department of Education for evaluation, and also the Michigan Department of Education can also do on-site visits and see if you're in compliance with state law. So there's a lot of scrutiny about charter schools, constantly under scrutiny most of the time. Unlike traditional public schools, which are kind of governed by their own body, which is mostly their school boards. So that's a huge difference. The other difference is, Wayne, about the difference between charter schools and traditional public schools is that traditional public schools base their, in terms of per pupil allotment with their students,
right,
is based differently based on your property taxes. The school board can go to the voters or the community to ask for a millage increase to build a school, or whatever the case may be for that particular school district. A charter school cannot do that. Charter schools, even though they're considered school districts by state law, they cannot go to the public and ask for a millage increase or anything to build or bond money to build new facilities. It doesn't work like that in charter schools. So, and also with charter schools, unlike traditional public schools, the per pupil allotment is the same across the board, no matter where your charter school is across the state of Michigan.
Right.
So let's say, for instance, if you have a student at a charter school here in Detroit that's $7,500 per pupil, it's going to be $7,500 in Muskegon or Benton Harbor. It's the same, unlike traditional public schools where they base their calculations on property taxes and meals and things like that.
Right. All right. Well, I think there's another question I really wanted to ask you, and I guess we're in Detroit. We're in the Detroit area. The school systems there have routinely been failing for the last. I'm a Detroit public school graduate myself, and I was seeing a lot of these problems even 15, 20 years ago. Why do you think there's so much backlash against schools of choice by civil rights groups and obviously teacher unions, but in particular, why do you think civil rights groups oppose school of choice for black students?
Well, the thing about civil rights organizations, and I think they're beginning to realize that the whole debate on traditional, let's just use Detroit for example, DPS versus charter. I think we're getting away from that, and I think what's starting to happen now is that a lot of the civil rights leaders are realizing that we do need charter schools. A good friend of mine is Chester Wheeler, who's over at the NAACP. He's the executive director of the NAACP. His son goes to a charter school. In fact, the same charter school my son goes to, and they're both in the same grade.
Okay.
Even folks like him who are traditionally gung-ho for Detroit public schools are starting to understand the notion that we need quality education for our children. Now, the thing about Detroit public schools, one of the major reasons why it's been chronically failing is because there's instability at the leadership level. You can't continue to use superintendents in the Detroit public schools as a revolving door.
Right.
I mean, on average, I think they stay around for 2 to 3 years, and then the school board don't like you, so they fire you and they hire somebody else. We had at least 11 superintendents since Arthur Jefferson. There's no stability at the leadership level.
Right.
And that trickles down into the high schools. It trickles down into other departments like curriculum and instruction, personnel, human resources, middle schools and elementary schools. That's one problem. The other problem is that we still have people in the Detroit public schools that feel that we don't need to downsize the school district. We still want to operate DPS as if we still have 200,000 students, when in reality we only have 77,000 students.
Okay.
So there has to be some downsizing and some cutting of the fat from the budget, from the school district itself. Maybe and I'm not opposed to outsourcing. I know some people like the security guards and DPS. I know they're opposed to that. I'm not opposed to outsourcing and privatizing some resources just to save some money.
Right.
So these are the sign of the times. And if Detroit public schools want to compete with the charter market, with the private school market, with the international market, we're going to have to downsize the school district where it's manageable and fiscally sound to move the district forward. And part of that is we're going to have to think about doing something different with the Detroit School Board. I believe that I'm strongly a proponent of county-ran schools. I think Wayne Reesa need to really get involved in some of the governance of how DPS is molded and shaped as opposed to a regular school board. These are some of the same. That's just on a personal level. I'm not speaking on nobody's behalf when I say that. That's just an opinion, and it's just also some fuel for some discussion as well.
Right. Now, when we talk a lot of times about education, you always tell me think globally. What do you think, not just in terms of Detroit schools, but on a national level, what do you think we need to do to take our education into the next generation, and what do we need to do to improve it?
Well, for one thing, I totally disagree with students. On our school days, on become globally competitive academically, we're going to need to institute all across the board, urban and suburban school districts across the board, a longer school day, and a longer school year, not a longer just a school day, but a longer school year, a longer calendar year for our schools.
Right.
And the other thing we need to understand is the curriculum. The curriculum is nowhere compatible to international standards. And when I say international standards, Wayne, I'm talking about when you look at the curriculum in Finland, when you look at the curriculum in Sweden and Japan, when you look at the curriculum in these other areas, they're not. They're far ahead of the game. I mean, just in Finland alone, they rank number 1 in math and science. And, you know what I'm saying? And same thing in Singapore, the same thing in Japan, the same thing in China. Third problem with education in America is that we lack a culture of academic success. We think education is to us is kind of like a blow-off course, and then you wonder why 55% of people in the city of Detroit are functionally illiterate. You know,
right.
Because we can't get jobs. How come we can't? One of the problems we get jobs is not so much that jobs are not available. The problem is that we don't have the skill set to compete for the jobs, to get the jobs, to make money, and to provide for our families. So when you have these factors working against us, I mean, even in urban school districts and most suburban school districts, they don't teach you metric. Well, the whole world operates on metric. How come we're not being taught metric?
Okay.
In our school. So those are just little things on the back end that we need to change. Even with the curriculum that was passed here in the state of Michigan, Wayne, with Governor Jennifer Granholm signed it to law a few years ago. We're complaining about how challenging that curriculum is. I'm saying we need to go higher.
Right.
So we've created a culture of educational being defiant when it comes to education that's really hindering our progress to compete globally here in the United States.
Okay. Yeah, and do you think that that's like, you know, a lot of the tech jobs, and people complain about a lot of foreigners are coming over here to get these jobs, but it truly has to do a lot more with the fact that they're being well educated and where they're from?
Well, let me give you an example. Not only to be well educated, they appreciate the culture of education. I'll give you an example. If you look in sub-Saharan Africa, you have children. I know this. You have children in places like Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, even certain parts of Cameroon. You have some children that are going to private school and being taught, British model of education. You have some children that are being taught in the dirt in the villages. And these kids, but the thing is, these kids appreciate education. And when they come to the United States to college, when they come to places like Wayne State, University of Michigan, and they major in things like engineering, education, science, information technology, they dominate. And the reason why they dominate is because they have those core values of academics that's been instilled in them since birth.
Right.
I just ran across someone today, a Nigerian who I know, and the first question he asked me was, we hadn't seen each other in a long time, the first question he asked me was, so are you working on your PhD? Education is always at the forefront of anybody I've talked to from the continent. And the reason for that is because it's just like we accept a certain culture here that is not to our benefit. They accept a culture of education that is to their benefit. And I think what we need to do is to really kind of harness and support that brain trust that's there. They're coming over here. What's happening is they're coming over here to the United States. They're getting our information. They're graduating from our universities, and then they're going back home to build up their infrastructure.
Right.
I think they should be able to do both, and I think we need a support system that's going to not only support them but also enhance their knowledge to help us with our infrastructure as well. So, I mean, this whole global education piece is very, very important if we're able to create economic development here in the city of Detroit or in the state of Michigan.
Right.
If we're going to be able to create, reconstruct family values here. I mean, these things are very important, and global education is that key.
I understand. Well, can you tell the listeners out here, if they want to get more of your knowledge that you share on a daily basis, where can they find you on your website or on Facebook?
Well, they can find me on Facebook at just typing my name. That's AKINDELE, You can type that in, and I'll save you as a friend. You can join in on the weekly. You can join in not even weekly, the daily discussions. We always keep it hot on my page. So just come prepared. They can also find me. They can also email me directly at One Choice PAC. Let me spell that for you. That's ONECHOICEPAC That's ONECHOICEPAC And I work with. You mentioned Gary earlier. I work with MAPSA are really my allies. MAPSA, they're my allies, and of course, I'm a member of BAIL, that's the Black Alliance for Educational Options. So I work with these organizations, along with Detroit Public Schools, stakeholders in DPS. I work with various organizations and various stakeholders on education all across the board, Democrat and Republican, independent, community activists, lawyers, doctors, to try to get this thing right, and that's what I'm about. I'm about solutions and not creating problems.
Right. Well, I appreciate it. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. I know you have a very busy schedule, and again, the knowledge that you share has been very valuable to me. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, Akindele.
Hey, no problem.
And you're always welcome to come back on.
Thank you very much.
All right. God bless you, sir. Have a good evening.
You too, my friend.
All right. So that was my friend and dear scholar, Akindele Akinyemi, and he, like I said, he has a more broad perspective of what we need to do to improve the educational system. I'm hoping the next time we do another educational debate that I can actually bring on some teachers that are actually in the system right now so they can add to what they feel we need to do to fix the system, because it's a process, and it's a lot of different issues that need to be addressed in different school systems. Again, you got a lot of kids that are coming to school that haven't eaten all day. There's a lot of societal issues you got to deal with, the discipline and the issues that these children have that they're not getting at home. So they're coming to school, and it's putting even the teachers in a tough situation. So I think again we got to I want to definitely talk to some teachers. Me personally, I would like to see more schools of choice, more opportunities for the parents, because in the current system, in the public school system, there's not enough accountability, and pretty much a lot of parents believe that that's their only option. That's the only place they can send their kids to get an education, even if they know the system is failing, even though they know it's something that they don't agree with. They just don't think that they have any other opportunities. So I want to do my best to help educate the public, let parents know that we do have different choices, different opportunities, help is out there in all sorts of ways to help us be better parents. There's no book on being a good parent, so, I mean, you're learning while you go along, but, everyone needs help in that. And, again, you have a lot of parents that are having kids at 14, 15 years old. They're still essentially kids, too, and you have a lot of kids growing up in that sort of environment. So I think we need to look at everything, all the different components of what we can do to improve the educational system. I think strictly from a strategic and a political standpoint, obviously the unions have an issue with the charter schools, and because they're not union teachers, that they have an issue with that. But we need to have people in place that aren't thinking from that standpoint, that's strictly about trying to enrich the lives of those students, those kids, because they've been the pawns for far too long between unions and between the unions and the public. I mean, it's a terrible thing. Detroit being a union city, we always strongly support our unions, but I think that people are going to start looking at it differently when you start looking at government jobs, and in particular things that are run off the public school dime. It's a lot different in the auto industry, where you're talking about people were being mistreated on the job, overworked safety conditions and these kind of things. And this kind of system right now, in particular the public school system, they're not concerned at all about the kids. And I mean that as the unions, not the teachers. There's a big difference, and I'm sure a lot of teachers listening in have to understand that that their union only cares about them and their jobs. That's their job. So for them not to, for me to say they don't care about the students, it's not only accurate, but it's just the nature of their business. They're in the business of keeping jobs for their members, and they really don't care how they have to do it. I mean, in the state of Michigan right now, they're asking for all state employees to make a 5% concession, as opposed to having to lose jobs and fire people, and every other aspect of work. If you're in the private sector, people aren't getting raises right now. People are having to give back. People are going to have to foot for more of their health insurance bills because, the company just can't sustain that. And it's unfair for them to believe that our government at any level can sustain that also because, again, we're paying for it. And it's only a matter of time before the government starts telling you they can't afford to send you your tax returns and they're short. And I think that's when they'll maybe get the attention of all the people, because people tend to believe this is just some kind of propaganda or we'll never run out of money. And all I got to do is tell you to go check out California if you don't believe that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the challenges that they're going to have to tackle and how they're going to handle it. Robert Bob's doing a good job in Detroit, but he's got a lot of challenges from a lot of different angles, and I just hope that he can keep that position because I think what two of my guests both mentioned on the show is the lack of stability in the public school system has severely hurt their cause. So I want to thank all my guests, Carol Goss, Gary Naeyaert, and Akindele Akinyemi for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. Again, this is an educational debate. Is not a situation of who's right and who's wrong. It's about what we can do to make the situation better and to turn this thing around. It will not be one solution. There is no silver bullet here. We have to work together and take a lot of the different ideas from different sources and work to all those ideas and not just one, so that we can get this our kids back on the right track. Again, I think that's one of the things I always talk about is the fact that our school years are shorter than everybody else's. The 3 months of time that we're on summer break, which I realize is an economic boom for the hotel industry and the leisure industry. But our kids while they're on vacation having a good time, kids from other countries are working, and they're getting those good jobs when they get out of high school and go to college. They're the ones getting the good jobs. And our kids are sitting around wondering what's going on. Well, we all have to step it up a notch when we're dealing with how important education is here in America. And again, that's from a national perspective. Obviously, from a local and urban perspective, the problems are twice-fold because we're dealing with other society issues and dealing with other challenges that you might not necessarily deal with on maybe in suburban life and even in rural America. So America has to push forward on its education agenda, has to make it more of a priority, and I'm hoping that that will be one of the causes that conservatives should be able to mount up together on and again, cut across party lines and across racial lines at an issue. And, well, I hope you enjoyed the show today. This is Wayne Bradley signing off for Conservatives Cool Talk Radio. Thanks for listening. God bless you and have a great day.